How's that? Good? Okay. Amanda Coffey, County Attorney's Office. Thank you very much for having me this morning. As Joel mentioned, we're going to be talking about virtual attendance of board members at public sunshine meetings. And this is an area of law that has been developed over a number of years, primarily through Attorney General opinions. And it's relevant to talk about today, as Joel mentioned, because there has been a shift in the interpretation of the law surrounding this area, and it gives us an opportunity to look at it and to, if you are interested in developing a policy, you could develop a policy related to virtual attendance for yourselves and also for your advisory citizen boards. So that is why we're bringing this forward today. And I'm just going to give you a little background on the history of the analysis of this area of law, and then we'll talk about some decision points that you could discuss when considering a policy if you choose to go that way. So, as I said, the Attorney General is primarily the area where this area of law has developed over the years, and they look at two distinct areas when they're doing their analysis of when a person can attend a board meeting virtually, and a board member can attend a board meeting virtually. The first that they look at is the Sunshine Law, which of course you're very familiar with. The Sunshine Law says that all meetings must be open to the public. They have to be noticed in advance. They have to have meeting minutes taken and so forth. The second area of law that is more critical when we're talking about virtual attendance is the requirement of an in-person quorum for any official action of a government body or an advisory board. The quorum requirements are under Florida law that there must be a physical in-person quorum in order for a board to take official action. So this is really critical. If there isn't an in-person quorum, there could be a challenge to any action that's taken. So the Attorney General has said in rare, extraordinary circumstances, a board member could attend personally and constitute part of a quorum, but that should be very rare, and we have to make a really careful analysis of that. The board would have to make a determination that that was appropriate. So we're talking about things like illnesses or pandemics, for example.
Amanda?
Yes.
So, okay, so if we have folks that are they're wanting to tune in, when you say a quorum is needed to be present, it doesn't necessarily mean that a majority of the seven, in other words, 4 votes, needs to occur on any vote. It's only a majority of those that are present. So it could be 3-2, for instance, if 2 people aren't there. If we have a virtual person, and it's, so I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so the vote issue is different from the quorum issue.
Okay.
And what the law says is you would have to have 4 people in person sitting here, and then you could potentially have other people attending virtually and not impact the quorum requirement, the in-person quorum requirement. And then the votes would fall however they fall. So those are really 2 separate issues.
Gotcha.
And what we're talking about here is really just the having bodies and seats in person physically.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And quorums are generally the majority of board members, but I just wanted to point out that you may have other advisory boards that have a different number. The governing documents for certain boards might establish a different number of members to constitute a quorum. So just be aware of that. It's not always the majority. So this is a list of the important Attorney General opinions on the topic of virtual attendance. As you see, there are quite a few of them over the years, and the Attorney General has been consistently very conservative in their approach to this matter. From about 1983 to 2003, the Attorney General primarily talks about when a person can attend virtually and be part of the quorum, the in-person quorum that we were talking about. In 2003, the Attorney General shifts a little bit in their analysis and expands that position to state, even if there is an in-person quorum present, any other member of a board can only attend virtually if there's extraordinary circumstances as determined in the good judgment of the board itself. So that's an expansion of the position that the Attorney General had taken prior to that time. And we've adopted that more conservative approach as well in our office in providing advice to yourselves and to your boards. Then 2020 happened, of course, and the whole world got turned upside down, and we all became much more comfortable using virtual meeting technology and telecommunications technology. And during that time, the governor issued emergency executive orders suspending quorum requirements, in-person quorum requirements. And when he did that, many of your boards got used to meeting virtually. Those requirements, or those executive orders, I should say, have since expired, and in-person quorums are now, again, required in order to conduct official business. But across the state, many boards, local government boards, had questions about this, wanted to know, can we keep meeting virtually? How do we do this if we want to? And so in response to that, the Attorney General issued a new opinion, 2020-03. This is a very expansive, long opinion. It summarizes the whole history of the law in this area. It's a good opinion. And in this, they recede somewhat from their very conservative position in relation to individuals attending meetings as long as there's a physical quorum present. So this is what the 2020 Attorney General's opinion states. It clarifies that meetings of government boards, and that includes advisory boards, must be open to the public. So the Sunshine Law always applies, of course. It states that a physical quorum has to be present for a board to conduct official business, unless there's either a statute providing otherwise. For example, State boards are allowed to meet with using telecommunications technology always. They don't have to have the in-person quorum that local government boards have to have. Or if it's suspended during a state of emergency, as what happened in COVID. The opinion then clarifies that a quorum can include a virtual member only in extraordinary circumstances, and that's at the discretion of the board. And that's the position that's always been the case, and we retain that position today. Now, here's where the change happens. The Attorney General now says, as long as there's a physical quorum present, any other members of the board can attend virtually, as long as sunshine meeting requirements can be met. And it doesn't require extraordinary circumstances. You can determine what circumstances are appropriate in that scenario at your discretion. Yes.
Commissioner Justice.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Attorney General, they just decided?
Yeah, so...
Interpretation of law, they just decided.
Yes, and that's a good point. The Attorney General opinions are persuasive law, right? The Attorney General analyzes the law and provides their opinion, and these are opinions. They're not binding on other agencies. However, in an area of law like this where they have consistently opined, the area of law really has been built up by the Attorney General interpreting the statutes. And so frequently in areas like this, we will look to the Attorney General for their guidance. Now, we can certainly give our own legal advice separate and apart from that. We happen to actually agree with them in this 2020 opinion.
So I guess the follow-up would be, if you had 4 people here and you had 3 absent, and we basically said, whatever, anyone can attend whatever, virtually, as long as we had 4. And then later on, there was a complaint or a suit about one of the votes that went a certain way. I guess I'm asking, how much bedrock does this opinion give us as far as the legality of our actions?
So it's always possible that someone can challenge the action of the board. I think that obviously your most conservative and safest position would be to have the entire board present physically. However, under Florida law, I think it's very clear that the only thing that's required is that you have an in-person physical quorum. So as long as you have 4 people in person, I think that a challenge to any action taken in that regard would fail. Doesn't mean somebody wouldn't sue us and we wouldn't have to fight it necessarily, but I think it would fail.
I only think about if, for example, the 3 out of the 4 vote one way, and then 1 commissioner here and 3 absent vote another way, and that's the prevailing way. Anyway, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And that was kind of what I was getting at earlier about the voting piece of it, so that if you have 4 people here and it's a 3-1 vote here, you don't have a majority of the entire commission. So it would be, in my little opinion, more susceptible. But if you had 4 of us here and we all voted for it, and the other, it wouldn't necessarily matter as much if there was a loss. Because you had 4, the majority of the commission was for it. To your point, if it was 2-2 here and the votes that were calling in made the difference, would that make us more vulnerable?
Looks like Jewel wants to take that.
And if I could add one thing, Amanda has very eloquently touched on the fact that we really rely largely on Attorney General opinions to render advice in this area. There's not a lot of case law on this topic. In fact, I don't think any case law on this topic. So keep in mind, as Amanda already said, Attorney General opinions, they're persuasive. They're really just another attorney's opinion, albeit the Attorney General. So that's another reason why we, tread somewhat cautiously. For instance, I wouldn't want to try out some virtual appearance new policies, for instance, at our budget hearing, because there could be, potentially some risk because there's not case law. So let me just say that inherent there would still be potentially, some risk because of the lack of case law.
Commissioner Gerard.
Yeah, I think you maybe just answered my question, but so we could adopt a policy that's more stringent than this. In fact, it might be a good idea because you never know when they're going to change their minds.
Yes.
Because I'm aware of a local board where there's somebody who just doesn't feel like coming to meetings. So this person, participates virtually pretty much all the time. And that's just not cool as far as I'm concerned. That's, if there's not some sort of extraordinary circumstance, I don't think that's right myself.
Yeah, you can establish a policy with whatever parameters you desire, and we'll give you some, after this I'm going to talk about some options for that. So the last thing I did want to point out before we leave this slide is that the Attorney General's opinion made it very clear that any attendance by virtual means wouldn't impact the sunshine as long as the sunshine requirements could still be met for public participation and so forth. So we don't have to be concerned about any sunshine implications. Really, this is more about the quorum implications at this point. So, as we mentioned, you could adopt a policy allowing virtual attendance at meetings as long as there's an in-person quorum present, but you can establish the parameters and limitations on that in whatever way you'd like. So, If you wanted to adopt a policy, these are some things that our office would recommend as a starting point. First, I think that it would be smart in the policy to reiterate that a physical quorum is required unless there are extraordinary circumstances. And again, we're talking for that illness, pandemic, et cetera. The policy should then authorize virtual attendance by a member of the board only when a physical quorum is present already, and as long as sunshine requirements can still be met, as long as the meeting location, technology, staff availability is also sufficient to support effective virtual attendance by that board member, where the board member themselves on their end is appropriately equipped with technology to speak and listen and participate in the meeting. We would recommend that you require that they ask in advance to attend the meeting virtually. And then a recommendation that we have, this isn't really required, but we would recommend that the policy state that the member who wants to attend virtually has to be hindered by circumstances from physically attending. Now, this is a little bit of a lower bar than extraordinary circumstances, of course, but it's a little higher bar than they just don't feel like it, they want to stay in their pajamas. So these are things that we think would be a good baseline for a procedure. And there are a lot of decision points that you would have to decide at your discretion in developing this policy. And these are some of those points. They're certainly not limited to this, but things that you might want to think about are, do you want to have the same standards for yourselves in the BCC as you do for your citizen advisory boards? Do you want the citizen advisory boards to establish their own standards? And if they're different, what does that breakdown look like? Would you like to adopt different standards for yourselves for work sessions versus official meetings? That's something that could certainly be considered. Would you want to delegate authority to grant the right to attend a virtual meeting to the chair, so that can be just granted in advance, or would you want that to be something that the board would vote on each time that the question came up? Would you want to limit the number of times an individual board member can attend meetings within a particular year, like one commissioner can only attend virtually twice a year, for example? Or do you want to limit the number of individuals who can attend an individual meeting, aside from the quorum requirements, of course? Would you want to say only 2 individuals of the board can attend a particular meeting virtually? And so, of course, all of those, you can decide what those standards look like. Finally, do you want to require video conferencing, because that's now widely available, or would telephone attendance be sufficient for virtual attendance? And any other standards and limitations that you deem would be appropriate. So you have the authority to make all of these decisions in adopting a policy if you want to do that for yourselves and for the advisory boards. We think a formal policy might be helpful in advising your advisory boards for consistency, but of course it's absolutely not required, but it is an option. And if you're interested in adopting a policy, we've provided a framework in your agenda packet. It's just a draft policy. It's not intended to be anything in stone. It's just a rough draft to kind of get things rolling, get the discussion started, something you can use as a framework. And it's got at the bottom of that draft some of these decision point questions that we just talked about. So that is the entire summary, and I can answer questions if you have any.
Yeah. Well, first, I agree with you, Jewel. Amanda, you did a great job. Thank you. That was very clear. Tried to make it as simple as possible. I think it can be very complicated, and I think we can try to bring that in for some reasonableness. I mean, this whole pandemic thing has just made us think about extraordinary. There's the offset is like, we want our residents to participate, so we're allowing them to do it virtually. We want our elected officials to participate. They were elected to participate. And if there's some reason, a family emergency, a health crisis, that they can still participate. Those residents that voted for them probably would appreciate that input, and I know we would too, unless they're voting differently than I feel. Kidding. But I think that's something to be thinking about as we consider this. But yeah, Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as we're going through a lot of these different things, I sit on the Gulf Consortium, and we meet 4 times a year, and it's one of those statewide boards that we don't have to meet in person because of the statewide. And early on, we had all taken a very strong stance that we were going to meet in person because we valued that interaction. After everyone got used to Zoom, and we tried conference calls, and that just, when you have 23, 25 people on a call, it just doesn't work. But everyone got more comfortable with the Zoom to where we now have a policy where we have those 4 meetings a year. 2 of them are in person and 2 of them are virtual, as we've all gotten more comfortable with doing it. And we're kind of through a lot of the heavy work of it. I'm still a strong believer that, especially on this kind of board, that we should be in person. If we're having a meeting, we should be in person, unless it's really, really extraordinary circumstances. That's just a core thing. This is the job. That being said, if we wanted to bifurcate it a little bit and have some of our work sessions or briefings or some of those kind of things, for example, if we didn't have a lot of things, if today was only the agenda briefing, if we wanted to do that by Zoom, I could live with that because it saves a lot of the staff time, the setup, all those kind of things that, But if we have a full day of brief, work session stuff, I still think in person, And then I would say, yeah, you have to have video conferencing, not just a phone. I think seeing the visual clues is important. It is that commissioner having the technology at home is an interesting part of it too. I know that I missed, and I forget which board it was last year, I missed a chunk of the meeting. I was sitting there, but my internet went out because we had a storm or something, and so I had a problem, and I missed some votes on that meeting because of my internet, my connection. So it's not a perfect system.
For sure.
Same thing happened.
Yeah. What's that?
The same thing happened to me where the internet was just
Yeah.
going in and out. And